Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. This is Morgan Reese, and welcome to Good Morning Black People with Morgan Reese. And I'm your amazing, fantastic host, Morgan Reese. And today I have the amazing, the almighty, humble, and knowledgeable Dr. Otto Stallworth. And welcome to my show. I'm going to play my intro, and then we're going to go right into interviewing Dr. Stallworth. Well, thank you again. Welcome to my show again. My name is Morgan Reese again, and welcome to Good Morning Black People with Morgan Reese. I have the amazing Dr. Otto Stallworth Jr., and he is a retired anesthesiologist, and also he's talking about his memoir. I'm not going to say the title. I'm going to let him say it for us, but he's originally from Alabama, and he grew up in the 1940s. So he's going to talk to us about his memoir and his amazing education and career as an anesthesiologist and about his memoir. Thank you again, Dr. Stallworth, for joining my show. I really appreciate you for taking out the time out of your busy schedule. It's an honor to have you here. Welcome.
Okay, and thank you for inviting me.
And so just to hear a little bit more about you, where exactly are you from now? I know you said you're from Alabama. Where do you live right now? And just tell us about who you are and your history and your education, your background.
Okay, I live in Los Angeles now, and I've been here since I finished my residency at UCLA, which was 1973, and I came here in '70 to start. This on the web. Oops, excuse me, I'm not talking to you.
It's Friday. It's okay. We're having technical difficulties all the way around, so it's all right.
That was Siri answering something that I didn't ask. Anyway, yeah, I grew up in Alabama, started in 1945, actually. And I left there at age 16 for the first time, left the state of Alabama for the first time at age 16 to go to college at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And then I went to medical school in Nashville. And I went to, I did my internship in Ohio, in Ohio, and my residency in anesthesiology in California, in Los Angeles. And I've been here ever since, decided to stay in Los Angeles. And in between those times, starting when I went to Howard, while in DC, I ventured to Brooklyn. I went to Brooklyn twice. And I went to Harlem while I was in med school. I did an externship and worked at Harlem Hospital. And I did a lot of traveling all over the East Coast. I spent a lot of time in 2 summers in Chicago. So my memoir kind of covers those adventures. They were all uncharted territory, and especially for me, coming from the South and with big expectations for my journey to the North.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm from Brooklyn, so because you went to Brooklyn, I know you have a lot to tell about that part of town. I'm a little younger than you. I would actually be 50 in September, so I was born in the 70s. So I can imagine you probably have a lot of history to share from your travels in New York. So can you tell us about the name of your book and give us a little excerpt or more details and what prompted you to write this book?
Well, I'll start with what prompted me to write it was I've always, English was like my weakest subject in college because most of my time was spent doing pre-med kind of courses, which was science and biology. And so during retirement, I decided I wanted to write, and something I wanted to do for a long time. So I started studying writing. I went to school for writing. I took courses, and then eventually I was invited into a writing group, and they were writing a memoir. That was around 2018, and that's where the memoir was born and conceived and partially delivered. we were interrupted by the pandemic, and during that time of the pandemic, I finished it off, and the book was actually published. The printed version was printed February this year, 2023.
Okay.
Yeah, and the title was based on, I went to, Birmingham was quoted by Martin Luther King as the most segregated city in the United States, and it was pretty segregated because I rarely saw white people except on TV. And so I went to all black kindergarten, elementary school, high school, and then I went to Howard, which was predominantly black, and then I went to a medical school in Nashville, Memoir Medical College, which is predominantly black. Out of 80 students in my class, there were eight white students. And then I went to Ohio, a Case Western Reserve Hospital, where I was the only black physician among 30 interns and residents. And I was asked that question, are you a N-word or a doctor, by a patient? I won't tell you the answer, so you have to read the book to find out. But yeah, that was a shocking thing. And that was the first story I wrote because, they said a memoir is different than an autobiography. An autobiography, you talk about it from the time you're born, all the way through what happened through all your life, all the way till the end, or close to the end. And a memoir is a slice of life. It's about whatever you want to send to write about. So it's more condensed than an autobiography. And that was the first time I started typing on the keyboard to type the memoir. That was the first thing I remember. I never forgot that experience, and a good reason. I mean, that's a pretty funny, upsetting question. At the time, I hadn't heard that word since I left, by a white man, since I left Alabama.
So you realize nothing didn't change just years later.
Exactly. So the title, when it was time to have a title, it was the title of one of my chapters, and it just was a little more provocative than saying Dr. Otto Stallworth's life, or memoir. I thought it's gotten more attention because of that, so it's worked. But that was a very fortunately, that was the only time I was ever asked that question.
Wow.
During the 45 years that I practiced, that never came up again.
Wow. And unfortunately, I've lived in the South probably longer than I thought I was going to be living in the South, because I've always lived up north, from Brooklyn, raised in Philadelphia. And we had minute moments. I know me personally, I had minute moments of racism then as a young girl. And then when I moved to the South as an adult, I didn't really realize how much it was so much in your face. And people would say, well, racism is up north as well and other places, but it was not more in your face as it is in the South. So for you growing up in Alabama, and you got all this education and this amazing career growing up, and then that person asked you that question, mine is the first thing that came to your mind. What was the second thing that said, now I'm going to give you my answer, and as you said, it's in your memoir, but did that kind of take you back to that time back then, or did it kind of tie inside what we got going on now in today's generation, today's decade?
Well, it was a complex. It was complex because I had heard the word used. When at the time that I was growing up, which was in Birmingham between 1945 and 1962. People who ran for governor, people who ran for mayor, people who ran for senator, they would talk on radio, on TV or radio, and say, use that word, when they were campaigning. It wasn't unusual to hear it. And when you saw the Ku Klux Klan, or doing demonstrations, civil rights demonstrations or whatever, people were using that word, yelling in anger, with their eyes bulging and this and that. And so in the case that I had, it was a patient, it was a different scenario. So I knew the difference. I mean, I had heard the word used when there was hate involved. And this person's, when you read that, you'll see that this person was, it wasn't a hate, it didn't come from hate. It didn't come from anger. It came from his limited experience. He was a sheriff, a retired sheriff of a small town in Ohio, and he was about 80 something years old at the time and a little bit of dementia. So, it was easy to excuse him in a way. Someone else, another Black physician, may have had a totally different response, and I wouldn't blame him. I wouldn't hold it against him or her. But that was I saw him as a patient that needed my help. He was born in 1880 or something like that, because this was 1970, and he was 81 years old. So it was a different kind of situation. It wasn't as bad as it sounds in a sense, but it shows you his limited exposure to Black people. In fact, I talk about that in that chapter, where when people aren't exposed to another race, rather in work or play or somewhere, you tend to have certain opinions that are based on hearsay and based on untruths rather than facts. When you're exposed to people and you work with people and you live around people of a different culture or a different race, you find out that we all have really the same thing in common. We all want good things for our children. We all want good health. We want good food. We want to have a good time. And there's no difference. You care about your family. You want to protect your family. That's kind of a universal need and a universal thing that you learn when you live together. When you live apart, if you notice now politically, most of the disconnect happens in Middle America, Republican states, where there are very few people of another culture. And so there's no exposure. So they believe all of these. If you remember during World War II, Korean and Japanese ladies and in Germany were told that Black men had tails. Wow. So I used to hear stories about from my father's friends my father didn't go to the war, but I used to hear stories from my father's friends about, when they meet Korean or Japanese women, they would want to see if they had a tail or not, because that was the rumor that was spreading among the Japanese.
Wow.
That Black men have tails. So that sort of thing kind of if you take that and just expand it to a different area where people don't know, you could make up anything about someone. And obviously probably some white men made this to make, Asian men made that story up to make Black men less attractive to their women.
Wow. Black men having tails. Okay.
Yeah. You never heard that?
Never, ever.
Okay, talk to anyone. Well, there's not many people around now who served in World War II. I mean, certainly, because they would be a lot older than me. I was born just at the end of World War II. But anyone who was around or who had grandparents or parents who were in that war, that's a very common story that was passed among, I don't know if it was ever in print, but it was passed among people who had that experience in the war.
Well, I like how you explain that patient's mind state mentality, because in today's time, if that comment would have been made, of course, you probably would have had some controversy, but you stuck to your career, your profession, and you stayed professional the entire time, where someone else probably would have never said it like that, or even had that thought process. And someone can say, oh, you're just making excuses. Oh, you knew this, what that meant. And you're saying no, because he had a different background, which is true. But it's like now in today's time, if you're putting if that statement was made or whatever to our Black professional doctors and in the medical background, and that experience is like, how can you take that now and apply that now in today, and you're not even in that profession. So let's flip the role. Say if he wasn't a provider and you're just regular Otto Stallworth, and that
I recently met some young, now that I've written this book, I get phone calls from people I grew up with, but also when I run into people in social situations, especially other doctors, they relate to me their experiences,
Mhm.
and a lot of them are in their 50s, and they tell me about stories where, as a physician working in the hospital, someone comes up and asks him to clean the bed, or
Mm.
go get the garbage, because they mistaken them because they're in a white coat. They don't think of him as a doctor. They think of him as some uh,
A
you know,
UPS employee or something like that.
right,
Wow.
right.
Teammate.
So that experience, everyone's experience is different. I had that one experience and never had that kind of issue happen. But uh, as I've heard from the people I just told you about, it was a husband and wife physician, and they both had that experience here in Los Angeles. At the hospitals in Los Angeles, where they were asked to empty the bedpan or something like that, because people just think, just without even looking really at them, they just see a black person, they just assume they're in a subservient kind of job, and that they don't. The first thing that comes to their mind is that they're a doctor. Other things come to mind, and
Mm.
that's the mindset of prejudice and lack of being around professional blacks.
That's true.
So it just is something that occurs because of even, and that's occurring in Los Angeles, which is probably one of the more diverse cities and states in the United States in terms of. Now we only make up what 7 to 10% of the population of California, but you have all these other groups. You have Persians and Hispanics and Asians, and I mean, there's a very diverse in that sense, that more so than most states, especially the middle states or Republican states, as you call it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, going back to your medical career,
Mhm.
what was the most impactful case that you had where you thought, I've been in this field for so long, I know this, have had this experience, I've done this. Do you have a case where it was just so impactful that when that day was over and it came to an end and you had to go back and think about what took place and um, figure out like, how I don't understand how this happened? Do you have a case that stands out for you in your career?
I have quite a few of those. I don't know where to start. Well, when I started my residency, um, uh, and I was at Harbor General Hospital, and it was before Martin Luther King Hospital was born, but in that same area, and we got a lot of trauma. And when you were on call, you worked 24/7. So there was I had my first case where I was left alone and had to treat a patient by myself for the first time. In other words, when as the first 2 months of your residency, there's always a senior physician, anesthesiologist there that monitors three other anesthesiologists, three residents, and you look to them for help. Well, I had a case where the anesthesiologist was busy with a real emergency in another case, and I had to handle an emergency, life or death type of emergency by myself, and I had a good result, and that gave me confidence. But then that just turned out to be an introduction to what was coming. You kind of get used to it after a while, used to the trauma and used to the multitude of cases and whatnot. So there's not one case that stands out in mind. Some cases caused me to, well, the 1980s, when a sequence of events happened, I had a patient that died. There was no fault. Nobody could stop it, but I had to talk to the son afterwards. That's a case, I guess, of all the cases that I had, that's probably sticks more so than any other. And the reason is because I lost my father at age 20. I was 22. He was 53. And then I had a patient who threw a embolus and died on the operating table. And he was 42. And I had to go talk to the son. And the son was 16. And usually the anesthesiologist doesn't talk to the son, but what had happened was the surgeon had left the hospital because he had another emergency. And just as I was getting dressed to leave, the son showed up. He had his father had an accident driving here from San Diego, and he didn't know he had arrived and didn't know anything about it. When he found out, he rushed to the hospital, and I had to talk to him afterwards. When I talked to him, it brought back. I saw me in him. I saw me at age 22 when my father passed, and I went into a state of, I guess you call it depression, or and because at the same time my mother died that year, my half brother died a year before that, and I had two friends who died in an airplane crash. I mean, I had a lot of things that happened all at once, so it sent me to a bad place. But so those kind of cases, those two cases, I think, stayed in my mind more so than most. But you know, when you're working for 25 years, I was in the hospital and handling emergencies. Now, the last 20 years, I went into cosmetic surgery, which is totally different than hospital work, where you're dealing with trauma and really sick people. Because in cosmetic surgery, one of the biggest differences is that nobody comes to cosmetic surgery. I mean, everybody who comes to cosmetic surgery comes because they want to.
Right.
So it's a happy place. Everybody's happy. They're looking forward to their new breasts or their flat tummy or their new lips or their new nose, or whatever. They're looking forward to that. So it's a whole different kind of environment. So the last 20 years was really different than the first 25 years of practice, because it's a happy. It puts you in a different mood, and it's a happy thing. And you know, as you get older, the trauma of handling trauma cases takes its toll on you. It's pretty debilitating. Plus, I had very sensitive. My first patient that I had during my internship, not my first, but it was one of the first, and I was on a hematologist service, and she was 16, and she came in because of some spots on her leg. What she saw was spots. I saw something else. I knew that it could be an ominous sign, or it could be something minor. Make a long story short, that patient came in at 16, happy, giggling, and within a month, she passed away, and bled to death from leukemia.
Wow.
And it was nothing I could do, and I felt so terrible. And I'll never forget, because my chief resident, what actually was chairman of the department, he said, he saw me upset and everything. He said, "You'll get used to it. You'll get used to it." And I said, I don't want to get used to it. I don't want to lose that feeling. And so that's part of the reason. Well, there's two reasons I went into anesthesiology. One was because of my back. I had injured my back at 18. I couldn't stand for more than 20 minutes, which is, you can't be a surgeon if you can't stand, for a long time.
Right.
So that was the reason. The other reason was that because prior to that time, I was talking about going into pediatrics, and I was on the pediatric hematologist service. But after that experience, I saw that I couldn't handle dealing with sick patients. In medical school, most of the patients that I saw were, had minor illnesses and stuff that I could help them with. It gave you a good feeling to cure somebody or to make them feel better or this or that. But when almost every patient I had on hematology, and this was 1970, but almost every patient I had passed away, and it was just a very depressing thing. I felt helpless. I mean, I went in medicine because I wanted to help people, and I wanted to cure people. I wanted to, see people feel better, and I wanted to have that ability. And when I had every patient died, it just sent me to a bad place. And I didn't want that. And I'm sure it's better now. I mean, I know it's better now. Hematology, oncology, and the treatments, for everything has improved, because we're talking about that's 60 years ago, or 50 years ago, 56 years ago. So things have changed and gotten a lot better.
And I'm glad you touched on that, Dr. Stallworth, because I work in the hospital system as well, but I'm on the IT side, so I'm on the technology side. And every location I go to, I always run if I see someone like come in with trauma, or I always tell my teammates, I said, I never want to get a call into a surgery room, because I've had teammates who said they had a call and they had to go in with a patient was being operated on. And because you brought up that mental health side, and I always used to wonder, how did they just walk around with this cold demeanor? and they're just working on patient at the patient. Like in my mind, I believe they don't see them as patients anymore. They're just seeing them as a number or
Yeah.
a patient account. And it's like, you got to have some type of emotion there somewhere. You know, when I see the nurses and the doctors, especially during COVID, it was so much death. It was so much loss. And the only thing I really saw the most, it was a lot of animosity, a lot of friction amongst teammates because, you know, they were overwhelmed and things started winding down, but they still had that tension. So in my mind, I believe that was part of that mental health. But instead of them working on it, they took it out amongst each other, and they may have taken it out at home. And by you touching on that, on the mental health side, I knew it was there. It's like they don't want to talk about it. As you said, if the provider said, "Oh, you'll get used to it," you can't get used to losing a life because God gave you that gift in your hands to
Right.
save life or to heal life. So for you to say it's normal, that's not a normal thing for me. Um,
No.
so, and for you to finally actually admit that out loud, most providers wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Most doctors wouldn't say that. It's like, oh yeah, this is normal. You see death all the time. You know, guys said you come and you go, but no, you got to have some type of emotion there. And I appreciate that you actually admit that and says, yeah, it does impact your mental stability. Um, my last question for you, as far as breaking barriers on the healthcare side. As we just found out now, education wise, now you can't use race to get into school.
Right.
And
Right.
believe it or not, that was sad because that was what was used from the beginning of time. You know, you
Right.
saw more of your Caucasian counterparts getting into, as you say, Howard and Harvard and all these top-notch schools, and then you have other black people, and you're like, you know, I'm just as smart as they are. You know, matter of fact, I might be smarter than them. So breaking these barriers today with this news that just came out, in your opinion, your thought, your mind, how do you think we can move past this now that this law has actually been passed? And it's like, now what do we do as Black community, as an Asian community? And I was just told that it was an Asian person who actually brought the lawsuit, and I didn't even know. So,
Right.
how do you, in your mind, your thought process, how does that?
Well, I think the first thing we have to remember, there was some people quoting data about the last election saying that a certain number of Black people didn't vote, that Black men didn't vote, or that certain Black people voted for Republican and this, that, and other. I think it should be quite obvious to everyone now that no one of any color, actually no one, because they only look out for themselves, Republican, no one should really vote Republican, especially for the candidates that they're offering. Prior to the election of 2016, I never really worried about whether it was a Republican or Democrat, because theoretically we should all be working for the same thing. Better home, better housing, better health, better health care, better Social Security, better everything. And how you get there was where the difference was, between the two parties. But now uh, the one party has gone off the deep end into stuff that doesn't even matter, and they're distracted by all of this stuff, what they call woke, which is a Black term, right? By the
Yeah.
way, that they stole from what was his name? Slim. I forgot his name. It was a blues singer, Ledbetter, quoted that lyric in a song in 1940s, telling Black people they need to be woke. And he was talking about, just watching what was going on. And they've taken that term, and I don't know how they define it, because there's no real definition. It seems like anything they don't like, they call woke.
Mm-hmm.
What was the point I was trying to make was that I lost my train of thought when I started thinking about woke. Put me back on track. What we were going
As
through.
far as breaking the barriers with now
Oh
with
yeah,
with education and now
yeah. So we need to wake up and realize how important the vote is, and we need to uh, yeah. I think I lost my train of thought.
so as far as you're saying, we need to stay woke to the things that are occurring today, and
Yeah,
that's how you help break the barriers with amongst our race mainly, because more our race gets impacted more than other minorities than it does. I know a lot of people say, well, you have the Asians, you have the Mexicans, the Latinos, and all that, but it seems like the Black people are more impacted than anyone else, because you got other countries, other cultures that come over and they already have a handout, and we've been here mostly all of our life and we don't get the help.
Yeah, this is the point I was going to make, though, that we as Black people have proven to be very resilient. I mean, if you look at, when I look at my childhood, and people say, well, how did you come through this? How did you come through that? I look back and I say, how did the people that parents of people that I grew up with, how did they survive and get to this point? How did they become educators as teachers? How did they become lawyers? How did they become doctors? And these were people that were doing it in the 50s, 40s, and 50s, and they had more to struggle against. So I think this is sort of I see this more of a wake-up call, in the sense that we had become complacent, thinking things that had gotten better. It's interesting that in the prologue to the book, the last 3 words of the prologue, I say something like, history repeats itself. And as we can see from what's going on, and now that's even more prominent than when I finished that book, because of what just happened, and some of the things that the Supreme Court has passed. So it's a reminder that we haven't come that far, that the same elements that were there in the 50s and 60s are still there. When George Wallace, who was the governor of Alabama, and said segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, and stood in the schoolhouse door to prevent a Black student from entering the University of Alabama. When he did that, later he ran for president. This was 1960, 61. And then he couldn't be governor for 2 terms. Then he had his wife, Lurleen, run for governor, and then he governed through his wife. And then he ran for president. And you know what his slogan was?
What?
Make America great again.
Full circle. Oh, it's just the wrong person said it this time, in my opinion.
George Wallace was, before he was attempted assassination, they left him quadriplegic or paraplegic. He was getting votes the same way Trump was getting votes. He was getting votes from northern states. No one thought he could get many votes outside of the South, but he was starting to get
making that one statement.
Maybe if he hadn't been an attempted assassination, he could have caused a problem for Richard Nixon, who won that year, run the presidential election. So things have changed, but I think this is just a wake-up call for us to realize that we have to stay involved. We have to vote.
Yes.
We have to keep people in power who have the interests of the country in hand. And the Republican Party is in a bad place right now because, at least for the more vocal ones are dealing with issues that are not dealing with the problems that we have. Banning books, concerned about gay rights, gay and lesbian rights, and don't want us to teach our history, Black history in schools, and all of this stuff. It has nothing to do with the problems we're having. They got a drug pandemic going on in West Virginia, with ODing on fentanyl and Oxycontin and all this kind of stuff. And we got so many problems that I could just list.
And those are the other ones that is not really that important, right?
Yeah, and they're dealing with, what we teach in school and all this kind of stuff. It's just it's divisive, and I think that's part of the ones who want power to be in plan. If you put people against each other, because the powers that be that are in control, they're only out for the people with money. To help people with money make more money. Like what they protect, and the billionaires, the this, the that. That's the way the system's going. It's a class thing. So that's getting a little bit off of what we should be talking about. But
no, actually, it may need to be brought out. Sometimes things got a lot of things that happen on purpose so you can get a message out. So, if you don't mind, would you mind reading an excerpt from your memoir to share
Sure.
with the world so we can so they can know what this book is about. And again,
Well, you know, let me find a copy here. I should have had a copy around.
take your time.
Okay. What happened here? Oh, here we go. Okay. Now I have, there's all kind of stories in here. Funny. You know what? I think I'll read one that's kind of it's called The Water Fountain.
If you could show up the copy of your book before you start reading.
Okay.
Or after.
Hold on a second. I should have had this ready. Okay, here's the front of the book. Oops.
So, guys, Dr. Stallworth is going to read the excerpt from his book whenever.
Yeah.
Dr. Stallworth.
This one's called. I don't want to read anything too long. Yeah, this is good. The Whitewater Incident. Whitewater Incident. I just released an audiobook, and they wanted me to. They said that in a memoir that the author should read the audiobook. So I started out trying to do it, but they wanted me to come and record for 5.5 hours a day for 5 days. So I read. I only recorded the preamble, and then I had a narrator do the rest, because when I sat here and I read for an hour, all of a sudden I was mumbling words and missing words. My Southern accent was coming out, and I, got tired after 1 hour, and that was just reading 2 pages. so
you said, go leave this for the professionals.
Yeah. This is called a Whitewater Incident. My doting mother smoothed and softened my 7-year-old face with a light layer of Vaseline and combed and brushed my hair as she did every morning before school. Dressed me in my gray suit and striped tie as she did every Sunday morning before Sunday school. But it's not a school day or Sunday, it's Saturday, and I was about to have an encounter with a white-only water fountain. Tucked on my button shirt, "Mommy, this collar is too tight." "Sonny, I don't know. I know you hate that tie, but I want you to look handsome for your picture. You can loosen it or take it off after that." We were on our way to Loveman's, her favorite department store in downtown Birmingham, because today only there was a discounted price for 8x10 black and white photos. As we rode in my mom's gray 1951 Plymouth, I gazed out the window at the buildings and at the people who passed. My first required reading was the Jim Crow white only and colored only signs plastered everywhere, even on city buses. Mom's eyes remained focused ahead as she dealt with the car's manual gear shift. "Sonny, you reading the signs?" I was supposed to read the street signs, billboards, store signs, and license plates. If I couldn't understand a word, I was to ask her for help. Just then, I saw the license plate on the car in front of me. Mommy, that car is from Montgomery." "And how do you know that?" "Because 2 is the first number on the license plate, and Montgomery has the number 2 most people in Alabama." "You're so smart." A 1 is the first license plate number meant Birmingham because it was the most populous city in Alabama. I recognized the tattered bumper sticker on another car in front of us, which read, "Y'all come," the campaign slogan of Governor Big Jim Folsom, called Big because of his 6'8" height. Mom said she voted for him because he was the only candidate not in the Ku Klux Klan. Each license plate had "Heart of Dixie," which is the Alabama state slogan, engraved at the top in dark blue letters with a red heart next to it. And next to that, the Confederate flag. The license plate had these in your face reminders just in case we forgot where we were or who we were. When I saw a white person on the street and in a car, I studied them because there were no white people in our neighborhood, our school, our church. And the 1952 TV with its 5-inch fuzzy black and white screens made white people's skins appear white, white like my notebook paper. But as we drove, the white people's skin I saw in the cars and walking on the sidewalk was not white as it appeared on TV, but a pale shade of pink. Mommy, how do white people tell each other apart?" "What do you mean?" They all the same color. So how do they tell each other apart? Members of a colored family are almost never the same complexion, not even the kids, but many shades of brown, along with tall or short, fat or skinny. We describe relatives or friends by their skin tones, which was especially helpful when trying to describe someone you just met. He's darker than so and so, or lighter than so and so, or two shades darker than so and so. The next thing I knew, we had parked the car and walked to the entrance to Loveman's. Never got the answer to my question, and I forgot about it. Loveman's four-floor department stores seemed massive. It was the largest department store in Birmingham and part of the largest chain in Alabama. The large octagonal clock high above the corner entrance to the Loveman's served as a preview to the Art Deco interior. The richly white and gray marble floors and walls, the walnut wood paneling, and the first and only escalator in Alabama set Loveman's apart from other department stores. Loveman's smelled different from the other department stores. For example, at Sears and Roebuck, as soon as I entered the door, I wanted the chocolate-covered peanuts I smelled. At Pizitz, the second largest department store, it was the luring aroma of cookies and cakes I wanted. But in Loveman's, it was the overbearing aroma of perfume and cologne, and I didn't want any. On the first floor, two tall, slender colored men dressed in decorative maroon and brown uniforms with jackets and black top hats stood motionless, like statues, at each end of the escalator, which rolled from the first floor to the mezzanine and back. Mommy, look at the soldiers. No, they ain't soldiers. They're helping the customers, the white customers who get dizzy or throw up while on that new stair thing. Come on, we're taking the elevator. Strolled to the ornate walnut elevator doors trimmed with gold metal, and as we entered, surprised by who I saw. Hi, Mrs. Black. Where's Collie? I asked. My friend's mom was the elevator operator, who with her light skin could pass for Billie Holiday. I couldn't help but eyeball her lit cigarette as it dangled and wiggled in the right corner of her painted bright red lips as she spoke. Hello, Sonny. Hi, Addie B. Collie's home, or he better be. She exhaled white cigarette smoke that surrounded her head and drifted slowly to the smoke-filled ceiling. The elevator door closed, and she sat on a small round stool to the right of the door, and she wore a brown uniform with pants that matched the wood panel elevator doors. On her head, a brown bellhop cap tilted to the side, like the little man in the I Love Lucy Philip Morris cigarette commercials. Floor, please, she stated in a robotic voice. I took mental notes as I watched her turn the big black knob on the elevator wall in one direction to go up and the other direction to go down until the elevator floor was even with the next floor outside the elevator. Mezzanine, please. Watch your step. No, mezzanine, please watch your step. We exchanged goodbyes and exited the elevator. After the elevator door closed, I wondered and asked, does she do that all day? Yes, it's called a job, said my mom. Some other department stores had separate colored dressing rooms, but not Loveman's. At Loveman's, the dressing rooms were white only. My mom insisted on trying the clothes on before she bought them. The store's policy was if a colored person tried on something, they had to buy it. One of her beauty shop patrons worked in housekeeping and took my mom to the colored female employees' locker room. She arranged a secret try-on for my mom in that locker room, and then we were to take the photos. As we walked on the mezzanine, I trailed a few steps behind, and a white-only food counter caught my attention. It had 10 black bar stools. Couldn't help but wonder how white-only food tasted, and why was it white-only? 10 years later, during the Civil Rights Movement, this counter desegregated after sit-in protests. This summer day in 1953, we obeyed that lunch counter sign, but another sign caught my attention at that moment, which I had no intentions of obeying. Across the room was a white-only water fountain sign with a separate lower water fountain for white children. Everything with white-only signs always looked better. And this white-only sign, water fountains, was no exception. It had shiny porcelain and gold trim faucets on a dark wood panel wall. The colored water fountain in the unfinished basement was a dirty white with scratches and no lower fountain for kids. When the white children drank from the fountain, I noticed they walked away with ear-to-ear smiles. I thought the white water must taste like lemonade. better than lemonade, better than my favorite drink, BB Grape, a popular Alabama brand. Plus, the white children's fountain was the right height, and I didn't need help to reach it. The long wait to take the photo gave me time to plan. My mom had set me on a chair while she went to the colored locker in the basement. With an obstructed view and path to the white water fountain, now was my chance to sample the white only water. I walked towards the fountain, licking my lips and preparing my palate. Had to stop and wait until an older white boy finished drinking. I walked as fast as I could, but I didn't run because I heard my mom's voice in my head. Stop running, Sonny. I pushed the lever, harder to push than I expected. Pushed again, harder. The white water gushed in my face. I'd swallowed just 2 gulps when my mom's voice came out of nowhere. Sonny, Sonny. She grabbed my arm, scooped me up. I yelled, it tastes like the colored water, Mama. It tastes like the colored water. I screamed again. She didn't respond, too busy apologizing to the white people who were staring. I didn't care. The curiosity of my child mind had awakened and was satisfied for now. I never forgot the white water incident, but after that, I found the white only signs difficult to understand because there was nothing special about the water. After the white water incident, they took this photo that day. Oops.
There you go. We got it. We move it up a little bit more. And
you
then,
know,
and
it's
then
funny, when I move it,
there you go. There you go.
wait a minute. When I move, it goes in the opposite direction.
So go to my, go to your, there you go. Keep going over.
I can't see it. Okay, here we go.
There we go. Right there. Wow. Look at you, very handsome, Dr. Stallworth. I see you. I see you.
That was the only suit I had, too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a powerful experience. I am speechless on that. Wow.
Yeah, what?
I am speechless on that. That's a powerful experience.
Speechless on that, on the white water?
Yeah. That's a powerful experience. I mean, I used to hear stories of that, but I've never met no one who actually experienced it.
Yeah, I was 7. Well, you can see I was 7 years old when that happened. But that's the world I grew up in. It was totally, as Martin Luther King said, it was the most segregated city in America, and like the bombings. Okay, I know you know about the 4 girls who died in the bombing in 1963. I knew all those girls, and I knew their families. I knew their sisters. I knew their parents. And one of the grandparents lived a few doors from me. And but prior to that, we were having 50 to 60 bombings a year of homes and churches and of what we call colored people at the time. And it never made the news outside of Birmingham. Most of the time, it didn't make the Birmingham news, but it made we had 2 black newspapers, the Birmingham World and the Birmingham Mirror. So only when those girls were killed did it make national news. And of course, that changed a lot of things. It caused more attention to the civil rights movement and was kind of a impetus for the movement to move forward and get more people involved. It became worldwide news. But my mother, there's a chapter in the book called Sunroom Chat, Sunroom Conversations. And it's a room where my mother and father had taken the front porch and enclosed it and had big windows. And because of the big windows and all the sun coming in, she called it the sunroom. So we used to sit there all the time. So I call it Sunroom Chats because I wanted to have a conversation with my father about why he quit, why he didn't go further than the 7th grade in school. And it was kind of a touchy subject because my mother was spending money to go to night college. She wanted to be a teacher. And he thought she should spend the money on something else. So I didn't want to bring it up while she was there. So she left the house to go on what we call White Man Watch, which became later known as Neighborhood Watch. But because of those bombings that I just talked about, on each entrance to our street, which there were 3, set in a car every night, all night, 2 females or 2 males in the cars, and they had walkie-talkies. And if anybody white showed up in a car or passed by, you radioed it, walkie-talkie it in to the men at the house, and they come out with the guns. And so, but anyway, that gave me And she had to do that for a whole year. It was her turn every Monday night. And so that gave me a chance to talk to my father about why he had dropped out of school in the seventh grade. And it turned out he dropped out. It was 1925, 26, because he had to get a job. They had just come up with something new called income tax. And, we only had telephones then. We didn't have cell phones. And they lived on a farm in Beatrice, Alabama, which, by the way, is in the same county as Harper Lee is the author who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. She used a fictional name in the book, but it was really about where she grew up, which was called which was in my father grew up in Beatrice, Alabama, and Beatrice was 10 miles from the city where she was born. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the area was like. But anyway, he had to drop out, and he got a job picking peas on a pea farm. And I write about that. It's called, the title of that section of the story is called Slavery Under Another Name. Call it by any name, but it was slavery to me, was basically it. So that's why he had to drop out, and that's why he dropped out and had to work. Yeah.
Well, my slogan this year, and I have a new one for next year, is 2023 is all about me, Dr. Stallworth. And I promise you, with everything you have been through, all the things you've endured, you've overcame, you are a true testament of this year and other years is going to be about you and how you survived and you persevered through all of those things, all those experiences as an intelligent Black doctor. Now that you're writing those stories and you're writing the experiences you've been through, is there anything you would like to share with the world, that's something that's motivating, something that's inspiring, something that we can take as we move on in this trying world that we're in right now, based on your experiences and your life journey?
Well, I have, when writing this book, it's sort of like I had never stopped to think about the past because I was so busy dealing with today and tomorrow. And one of the stories I recall was how I got to college. And the chapter is called Reverend John Wesley Rice, My Unsung Hero. And Reverend Rice was, by the way, Condoleezza Rice's father. When I graduated from high school in the 12th grade, she was in the second grade. So she was a lot younger, over 10 years or so, I guess. And so I didn't really know her growing up, but her father, they lived in the neighborhood a couple of blocks away. His church was right on the corner from my house, and he was the high school counselor. And my senior year, I had good grades, but my senior year, I came to the realization that my parents didn't have the money to send me to college. And I wanted to go to Howard. I could attend some local college, in Birmingham, but we couldn't afford all the other expenses. We couldn't afford the tuition, and in addition to that, all the other expenses of food and shelter and so forth. And he took an interest in me, I guess, because he knew my mother, and he knew that I had good grades. And he also, in Birmingham, people always ask you. Adults always ask you as a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? That was one of the first things they asked you. So I had to have an answer. And I started saying doctor when I was 6 or 7. So he knew that because every time I saw him, that's what ministers do, especially, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always say, a doctor. And he'd say, good. And then, so he remembered that. And so he wanted to make sure that I got to college. And make a long story short, he found a scholarship that had only come into existence a year before that, where the scholarship was based on need. It was they call it a National Defense Loan Program, National Defense Act, and they provided, first of all, 50%. They provided full coverage, but 50% was scholarship, 50% was loan. And that he arranged that for me to get to go to college. And also I had that same thing called the National Health Defense Act that helped me go through med school on the same conditions. So remembering that experience, and knowing what's going on now with our, especially our black young males, with filling up the prison system for minor crimes and whatnot, and not seeing themselves as viable alternative. I want to give some help for students that were motivated, who did have grades, who were in the situation that I was in. They had everything, had the desire, the drive, the determination, but had no money. And so I started this foundation called the Stallworth OES, OHYES Foundation, which supplies, right now, we've only can afford 2 scholarships. We do 4-year scholarships. We have one 4-year scholarship at Howard and one 4-year scholarship at Meharry. And of course I'm focusing on black males, and I wanted someone from Birmingham or Alabama or the South. And I have to tell you that the first one was awarded last September. And this is just a fantastic story. This young man who received the scholarship, they called me and asked me if it was okay if he wasn't from Alabama. And after I heard his story and after I spoke to the man, I was just overwhelmed. His mother he was homeless. He was living homeless, living on the street. His mother was a crackhead. And I'm not sure what happened with the mother, but somehow he ended up with the grandmother. And you have to give the grandmother kudos, because whatever she did to turn him around, or keep him focused, he ended up going to a small college in Nashville, and he got good grades and did well enough on the exam, the MCAT exam, to get admitted to Meharry Medical College. Had no money. And so we provided him a 4-year scholarship, and he's turned out to be just amazing. Now, unfortunately, his grandmother passed this past February or March. But the only requirement I require, and I try to drill into the people who receive the scholarship, because they don't have to, they finish loan free, they don't have to pay any loans. But I want to make sure that they do the same for somebody as I'm doing for them when they get to that point that they can do it. And that's the only requirement. So, and this gentleman is already giving talks and being inspirational to other students. And I asked him the question, I said, you're so motivated and you came out of all of this drama, all of this trauma, living on the street, no food and this, that, and other, homeless. And here you are. And what's happening to other black males? Why aren't there more males doing like you? And he said that they don't believe they can. They believe in the stuff that's out there, and they get stuck in this thing. And so that's something I think that we need to focus on, our young black men. The colleges are 70% female now and so forth. And we need to do something about that. Because when in my medical school class, out of 80 students, there were just 4 females. And now that same school is about 70% female.
Wow.
So out of 100 students, there's 70 females and 30 males.
Wow. Well, you definitely shared that information about your scholarship. So I'm hoping some black men are listening to this show today. I have interviewed the amazing Dr. Otto Stallworth. He comes with a lot of wisdom, guys, a lot of knowledge, a lot of history, a lot of experiences, living in Birmingham, Alabama, living in California. Racism is real, people. Racism is real, no matter what your lifestyle is, where you come from. And Dr. Stallworth has basically shared those trinkets with us. He read an excerpt from his book. He's offering a scholarship. Not too many people that's our color that's offering scholarship. So I need you black men, you young black men, reach out to him. If anyone needs to follow you or find you, Dr. Stallworth, can you let us know your social media platforms and how can they find out more information about the scholarship?
It's Otto E. Stallworth Jr. MD.com. And Junior is just JR. So it's Otto, and E is my middle initial. So it's Otto E. Stallworth Jr. MD.com. And all the information is there, including information about the foundation.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Dr. Stallworth, for taking up the time out of your busy schedule. I am so grateful that you decided to join my show. I would like to know if I can bring you back at any
Sure.
time, because I'm quite sure you're going to have another memoir out, or you're going to have some more trinkets you want to share. So if you're able to, would you like to come back on my show?
I certainly would. And do you have a copy of my book?
I do not. I do not. I'm also an author as well, so I am in the process of rebranding myself. So this is why you are my first person coming back on my show, because I took a
Oh,
break for a minute because I'm rebranding. I have a new journey, a new chapter with a new manager. So I'm going to work on getting it. I promise you, I am.
well, I may send you, if you send me a mailing address, I'll send you an autographed copy.
Oh, I appreciate that. Okay. But we'll talk offline, as I say at work. We'll talk offline. Again,
Okay.
I'm so grateful for joining my show today, Dr. Stallworth. Guys, again, this is Good Morning Back with Morgan Reese. I'm your amazing host, Morgan Reese. Fantastic Friday. I hope everyone have a great weekend, a safe 4th of July. Please don't go out there be blowing up things with them fireworks. And again, thank you, Dr. Stallworth, for joining my show. And please stay on and we'll talk after. Again, thank you guys again. Have an amazing weekend. Please be blessed.
Okay.